The average time for knowledge translation in medicine is somewhere between 10 and 17 years, right? From the time that we know something to it getting to the bedside to help a patient can be 10 to 17 years. I look at that as that's 10 to 17 years that we could have helped people that we didn't. And so we as medical educators should be trying to figure out ways to take that information and get it to people faster.
This is the Visible Voices podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. In today's episode, I'm so glad to be speaking with Dr. Anand Swaminathan. He's an associate professor at Hofstra. He works at Staten Island Hospital. Swami is a powerhouse in emergency medicine education. He may be a familiar voice to you, audience, through perhaps Rebel EM, Rebelcast, MRAP, and countless other platforms where he's transformed how we learn and share knowledge. Anand, welcome to the Visible Voices podcast.
I am so happy to be here, Resa. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love the podcast, and I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you. And okay, first question. Are you a little nervous because you're usually on my side of the mic and you're on a different side of the mic?
It's funny. I went for a walk with my wife before this, and I was like, I don't remember the last time I was interviewed. I have to actually not just ask questions. So a little nervous. I feel very comfortable in front of the camera and in front of the mic, but it was a little bit of a tables are turned. But let's see if I remember how to do it.
And let's see if I can create some psychological safety here. So you truly are one of the most recognized voices in emergency medicine education, knowledge, and knowledge translation. In fact, you've talked about one of your things is knowledge translation. So can you take us back to when you realized that education was something that you're like, I think I like this. I think I want to do this.
I think it was probably somewhere midway through my second year of residency when I realized that I wanted to stay in an academic institution and teach at some level, whether that was residents, med students, faculty. And I think a lot of it was because of how I learned and recognizing the limitations of the kind of classic teaching and how it didn't really work for me and wanting to find a better way to do it, but also understanding that the only way I was ever going to stay sharp in emergency medicine, do a good job taking care of patients, was to be on the education side and continuing to push myself to learn more and be better at it. So somewhere around that point, I felt like this was the right thing, the right match for me. The average time for knowledge translation in medicine is somewhere between 10 and 17 years, right? From the time that we know something to it getting to the bedside to help a patient can be 10 to 17 years. I look at that as that's 10 to 17 years that we could have helped people that we didn't. And so we as medical educators should be trying to figure out ways to take that information and get it to people faster.
Take us back to elementary school, junior high school, like you're speaking, like were you on debate? Did you do musical theater? Like where does this come from?
So we didn't have a debate team, but I did enjoy public speaking. We had a public speaking class we had to take in sixth grade, and I enjoyed it. I don't think I was good at it necessarily, but I liked it. And all through high school and college, I was a singer. I was in an a cappella group.
Pause.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Okay. So I went to a small private school when I was in high school, and we had one men's group and one women's group. I was in the men's a cappella. It wasn't really an a cappella group in high school. They did some stuff that was accompanied, but some of it was a cappella. And then went to college, and I auditioned for every single a cappella group on campus, except for the all-female ones. Every single one, and I didn't get into any of them my freshman year, but then my sophomore year, I actually got into a new group. So I still didn't really get in. It was kind of like, we're starting, we need bodies. And it was like a big part of my college experience. And I really enjoyed performing. I think, Resa, I hate to latch on to stereotypes. I'm the middle kid. And I'm sure this was I need attention. I have to work for it more than my siblings do. And so I did it. I did it for 4 years in college. I actually did it in grad school for a couple of years when I was getting my master's in public health. Haven't done it in a long time, but I think that performance stuff really fed back to how I think about medical education, how I think about lecturing, the way that you hold yourself. If you're singing, you have to hold yourself a certain way or else you can't get the note right, that you can't have the same oomph behind it. And I translate that kind of naturally to speaking. I think it'd be harder if I didn't have that background, but a lot of people that you hear on podcasts or on that lecture a lot, they're like, oh, I have a background in theater. I was in plays, I was in musicals. And so they have that stance. Or if they don't, they work on it a lot. Yeah. And those that didn't have it, they are often like, that's what I get coaching on. I get coaching on how do I stand? How do I project my voice?
I wanted to share that, first of all, I feel like I may have unlocked a knowledge nugget about Swami that maybe people didn't know. So I love that. I was like, no, there's something. It came from somewhere. It came from somewhere. So I
Risa, I
love that
gotta
I
say, I
was
did
right.
did mention on MRAP a couple years ago, and I
Okay.
dared our sound design person to find any clips of me singing. And of course, he was like, "I'm not going to go find them. I'm just going to call your mom, and your
Yeah.
mom's going to have a CD." And my mom mailed MRAP the CD
I
so that
love
they could
that.
take it and steal it and like embarrass me. Just embarrass me a little bit. I would
Yeah.
say it's not that embarrassing. Like I'm very proud of what I did, and it was a big part of my life that is I've moved on from now.
Given this breadth and this length of time that you have been developing and realizing your voice, when do you think you first said to yourself, I have a voice? And when did you actually start using it outside of the singing?
I think I really kind of focused in on lecturing my fourth year of residency. As a senior resident, as a chief, we had more opportunities to do lectures if we wanted to. It was kind of optional. And I was like, I think this is an area where I would like to, not that I have the expertise, I'd like to develop that expertise. And the only way to develop it is just to go out there and do it over and over and over again until you get good at it. I think that was the first time I took the opportunity, got a little bit of feedback on those lectures. And I think the fact that as a fourth year resident, I was lecturing and people were like, oh, that was really good. I was like, oh, well, maybe this is something that I can do. And just kind of kept volunteering as a junior attending. I just told the people planning conference, I'm like, anytime you have a hole, I will fill that hole. And then kind of I cold emailed every residency director in the city and said, I'm trying to lecture. I'm trying to learn how to lecture. I'd love to come and give an hour or two lecture at your institution. And Risa, this is one of the dirty little secrets, at least in emergency medicine, for people who are looking to grow in this area. Everybody needs extra content for conference. They will say yes. Almost every place will say yes, and they will have you come in to do an hour or 2 hours. And that opportunity was great. And over the first 2 years out of residency, I probably did like 50 or 60 lectures at all of these different residencies. And that helped me to develop my voice a little bit more, what I wanted to communicate, how I wanted to communicate it, developing my own style. In the beginning, I just mimicked other people's styles. And then you just start to develop your own tempo, the way you project yourself. And it just took time to do that, but you have to kind of put in that work. And I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
really liked doing it.
Such a great share and such a learning opportunity for people wondering how to break in. Now, I wonder if you've had this sort of pushback or this sort of patronizing response to what you do. Bear with me here. So, I too identify as a medical educator, mostly within ultrasound. And I would say we're 80-20 in academics and in emergency medicine. 80% of us teach, and 20% of us are researchers and get NIH grants and really pursue that. In academic medical centers, it's often the researchers that are valued. Although I always say this, we have no idea if they're good people. We have no idea if they're good clinicians, but
Sure.
they get research funding. I have felt that within academics, people are like, oh, that's so cute. You teach. We need you. We value you. You can work with our trainees. But often there's not compensation and there's
Mhm.
not protected time that comes that's commensurate with then, for example, what we see with our research colleagues. What are your thoughts?
There's hard dollars attached to research. And I get that. That's why the institution values it. And thank God there are people who want to do that research because I'm not that person. I think we probably are similar in terms of our bibliographies. Like we did a little bit of research at some point, we published at some point, and then realized this is not what I enjoy doing. So for me, it doesn't matter how much money is out there. I'm never going to be able to get that money for research because it's never going to be enjoyable for me to pursue that area. Yes, you get a lot of that. I wouldn't say patronizing, but definitely like, oh, well, we're all in academics. We're all teaching residents. I'm like, we all are teaching residents, but are we all doing a good job teaching residents? And there's a difference. I think people think that you're in academics, you can naturally teach people how to do the thing that you do well. And it's not, there's nothing natural about that process. You may pass some traits down. There may be some osmosis going on without you doing any intentional thinking about teaching. But for those of us who have built a career in medical education, there is so much intentionality to how we teach, where we find those opportunities to teach, how we think about teaching, the time we put into that. I wouldn't say that I spend as much time thinking about that as my colleagues who do research spend doing research, but it's similar. And I think if you are going down that route, or that's the route you're in, and you're trying to figure out how do I get my institution to value me more, you have to figure out what's the thing that you do differently. What are you offering, right? So am I offering that, yes, I'm educating the residents, but I also will educate faculty? Or even better, I'll also educate medical students because we know that's where institutions place a lot of value is on their medical students. So, which is great. I'm not bemoaning that. Like I'm not a medical student educator. That's not my push. But if you have an interest in that, then go teach there and then make that part of your portfolio. Teach faculty, right? Those are the things that give you value to your institution.
And I'm not even saying that we need to necessarily give value to the institution because these institutions will take and take and take and take. But
Absolutely.
because of what I said was sort of this, response of like, oh, that's great, you teach. We value teachers, but we're not going to demonstrate our value through these things. Is that one of the things that drove you, or what role did that play in? Like, you have amazing success in these other medical education outlets that are arguably reaching a much broader audience and also arguably giving you some compensation.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a matter of how do I reach the most people, the most learners, but also, I want a little bit of benefit from that too, because at some point you realize I'm not going to spend my entire career at one institution. And so if everything I do is for that institution, when I pick up and leave, what do I have? Aside from, my clinical abilities, I have my education level, but I'm not taking something with me. Doing something outside of the institution allows you to take something, carry it from institution to institution, carry that value with you. But more importantly, it allows you to continue with projects. When I was at NYU and I was there for 4 years of residency, 9 years as an attending, I built a massive online platform for education called CoreEM. I was very proud of it. But when I left, I had to leave it behind. And that was hard because I put 6 years of my life and effort into building it, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
There's a real value to having something outside that you can continue to do. And I love MRAP. And I've had a great fortune of having many mentors. One of them was Mel Herbert. And I remember going out, recording with Mel and asking him, I was actually out there with Haney Malamet, another educator we both know very well. And Haney asked him, Mel, what should I change today in terms of education? What would your advice be to me right now? And he said, this was about 13 years ago. He said, stop doing grand rounds at residencies.
Ooh,
I'm like,
tell
whoa,
me more.
wait. What do you mean stop doing grand rounds? Like, that's the heart of what I do. It's like, listen, you go and do grand rounds. I'm not saying don't do those, but you speak to 30 or 40 people. You spend a lot of time doing that. You're traveling. It's a day out of your life. Or if you're traveling outside of the area, it's 2 days out of your life and you reach 40 people. It's like, that's not a good use of your time. Now, if you want to do it on the side, great, but you should be trying to find bigger platforms where you can reach more people. So MRAP for me is one of those. Rebel EM is one of them. We see lots of our colleagues in education who have a platform that reaches hundreds of thousands of people instead of 30 people. And that has a bigger impact, but it also brings joy to us when you're interacting with these people across the country, across the world who are trying to learn. Not everybody can access the same ivory tower resources that you and I have. So it's bringing those ivory tower resources to everybody. And there's a real inherent value to us for that. When I say value, like not I'm going to get paid more, the institution's going to value me more. I'm going to value me more.
Yeah.
That I can reach all these people and try to build emergency medicine outside of my area.
Yeah. This is mission overlap, and one of the many reasons why I pursued point of care ultrasound in terms of equalizing access to education and to better patient care.
Absolutely.
I've known you for many years. We've been in each other's worlds in a really great way. New York City's where it all started. And what I'll say is I've watched you grow and evolve. And one of the difficult times for many of us was COVID, the pandemic. And I saw you make yourself speak very vulnerably about your navigating COVID and what you were doing and how you decided to perhaps change some of your priorities and double down on self care. What can you share about that period for you and where you are right now, the other side of that?
COVID was obviously a very hard time for all of us, not just in medicine, but all of us really struggled. And it was a lot of figuring out what are the most important things, especially when we were seeing our colleagues get sick or very sick and thinking, I'm giving so much to this career. What do I want to give to myself as well? I had never been in therapy before. And Resa, you know this, but the listeners don't. My wife is a psychologist. She's a clinical psychologist. This is what she does day in and day out. I had never been in therapy, but COVID pushed me to go and get help because what we were seeing was such a moral injury to us as physicians, us as clinicians, of the not being able to provide care, not being able to allow family members to visit their loved ones when they were dying. All of these things really harmed us. And so having therapy was really important to me to kind of talk about that and get through it. I think doing some of the media stuff was also an outlet to get through this, to communicate with others of what we were doing. all of this kind of helped me to really put a value on what all of us were doing at that time, put a meaning to what we were doing at that time when often it seemed like we're not doing much and there isn't a value and we were so harmed. So a lot of it came from that. Taking care of myself mentally, from a physical standpoint, you kind of realize at some point I weigh a lot more now than I did in high school. So maybe this is a time to get myself in better shape, think about what's going to be good for me going forward. So whether it was running, trying to eat better, all of those things. And people ask me, it's like, I'm like, I don't have any specific diet. Like, you don't want to ask me for dietary help. I eat what I think is supposed to be good for me. But I think trying to find time to take care of ourselves. We talked about this offline. I tried meditation and yoga, wasn't going to work for me. My mind is just a little bit too scattered. I couldn't focus myself. But running is a nice 45 minutes for me to just kind of wander and let my brain turn off. I love it. So I think it's important for all of us in medicine and obviously outside of medicine to find that time, even if it's just a little bit, which is, it's impossible with how busy we are sometimes. But once you carve it out and you make it a regular part of your day, all of a sudden you realize I can do this. I can do it if I prioritize it. It's just like anything else. If it's a priority, I will find time. I'll find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, beautiful. And I know that you've continued in these self-care practices. And I, on many episodes, as well as in the book Micro Skills, really highlight that if we don't take care of ourselves, nobody else will. And the career of medicine will take and take and take and take and take. Knowledge translation, like you have highlighted that you are a medical educator, but you sort of really love knowledge translation. I didn't ask you ahead of time to prep a definition, but what would be a working definition? What do you think of, describe that?
I think the idea with knowledge translation is how long it takes for something to be known for it then to get to people that are going to use it. Right. So we know that the amount of information that we are gathering as a community, as a society, is exponentially growing. Right. We're finding out so much all the time, and not just within medicine, but just across all disciplines. But how do I get the information that's discovered to the clinician that can use it? And when we look historically, there are papers on this showing that the average time for knowledge translation in medicine is somewhere between 10 and 17 years, right? From the time that we know something to it getting to the bedside to help a patient can be 10 to 17 years. I look at that as that's 10 to 17 years that we could have helped people that we didn't. And so we as medical educators should be trying to figure out ways to take that information and get it to people faster. Um, you know, One of the things I kind of kid around with the residents about, or even the other faculty that I work with, is that I don't actually think that I'm all that smart or have done anything unique or different. But what I think I am really good at is figuring out how to communicate things to others. So I might not be doing the research and finding the new information. I might not even be figuring out the best way to think about this in a clinical setting. I'm getting that from all of the people that I get to interview that are experts, but I'm really good at breaking it down into something that everybody can look at it and say, oh, okay, I understand that. Now I can implement it. That last piece is where I think I fit into the puzzle. Again, I talk about this with lots of people. I don't even think I have that creative of a brain, but I'm really good at figuring out I have this information. It's here. How do I get it to here where the clinician is and where the patient is? That's really my focus.
I'm going to add that one of the things that you do really, really well that does help you stand apart is your willingness to be vulnerable. Similar to what you just shared about how you navigated what you were doing during COVID. I recently watched a YouTube episode of you with CMO of MRAP, Mizuho Morrison. And she presented a case and you were working through it and it was really engaging. I was really into it. And then you both said this in a very matter-of-fact way, like the reason you centered on the diagnosis and got the diagnosis is you learned from the misses. So for audience members, not everybody's a doctor in healthcare, but learning from misses and, eating humble pie on a regular basis is what we do. So tell us more about your experience with that and why that actually is a very useful way to help with that knowledge translation.
There's so much within medicine that we just don't understand. We don't know. The information isn't obtainable yet. And so when we go and take care of a patient, we're working in this void of I just don't have all of the information I need to really do the best for that patient. But then retrospectively, we get more information, especially in emergency medicine. People are like, so what do you think is going on? I'm like, I've known you for 30 seconds. It's been 30 seconds that I've known you. I don't know yet. And so we have to accept that challenge. In fact, I think we have to embrace that challenge of uncertainty in medicine, and especially in emergency medicine, is that I don't know. I don't know those things that are out there, and I'm trying to learn them. I'm trying to find out. I don't do a lot of quotes, and I have a terrible memory for them. But Richard Feynman has this great quote about how, not knowing something is not a weakness. It's actually good. That's how we have scientific discovery. That's how we learn more. So when you see these cases that just don't go the way you thought they should, or you're just like, I'm totally lost. And I have them almost every shift. I'm like, well, days from now, when this patient has had 19 different consults and we have more information, somebody's going to figure out what this is. Maybe, hopefully. And then I can learn from that. And then once I learn from that, then I can incorporate it into my knowledge base so that when I see it again, I can be like, oh, I've seen this. I know what this is, right? Residents often ask us, like, how did you know that one? I'm like, because I've seen it before and I missed it, right? I missed it 15 years ago and I locked it into my brain of, I'm not going to miss this one again.
Yeah.
That's how we do a good job. And it's hard because we work in such a litigious setting here, and people are so worried about medical malpractice. They don't want to admit that they don't know something or that they're wrong. The more certain we become of our uncertainty and how little we know, the better physicians we are, the better clinicians we are, the better the patient understands, hey, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to do my best to take care of you. And then here are the things to look out for. I think that's how we grow. And actually, from a medical malpractice standpoint, that's how we do better not engaging in medical malpractice, is being honest and open, right? When we hide it and we make people believe that we know everything, this is what it is, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to be fine. And when something bad happens, they're like, what happened? But if you are honest and open, you have a better relationship with the patient. They're less likely to be like, that doctor sucked and I'm going to go after him.
We're getting direct and indirect feedback all the time. And what you just described is a direct and an indirect means of getting feedback on your patient care. Flipping back to the medical education side, outside of the clinical space, for yourself, how do you solicit feedback and how do you give feedback? Maybe one technique to solicit and one technique that you use to give feedback.
Yeah. Soliciting feedback is really challenging in a clinical setting with residents. They often don't feel comfortable with giving you feedback, but I try to make it kind of a normal part of the day right from the start. I'd be like, hey, this is how we're going to work together today. Here are going to be our goals, or you tell me what your goals are. We'll try to meet those goals. And at the end of it, I'm going to give you feedback, and I want you to give me feedback on how I did. You don't necessarily have to give me feedback like, wow, I would have managed that case differently. I understand if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but you can give me feedback on how we worked together, how we taught together, how we engaged with our team together. If I supported you as much as you needed support, those are the things that they can give me feedback on. And you just kind of set it up from the beginning. It's not going to happen the first time. The first time that you walk up to an intern and you say, hey, I want you to give me feedback at the end of the shift, the feedback is going to be like, I loved working with you. But if you keep doing it, if you keep giving them feedback and keep asking, eventually they're going to become more comfortable saying like, I wish that when I called this consult, you were there to back me up, as opposed to me kind of floundering and then you having to call back the consult, right? That's a frequent one that I hear, is that I don't feel comfortable doing the consult. I'm like, great, I'm going to sit right here. You're going to sit right here and you call and I will give you feedback on that call. In fact, if you want, we can even walk through that consult before you call them.
I love the role play.
Oh,
I
the
love the role play.
Right. And I try to do it not from like a pejorative standpoint of the consult of the consultant, but just kind of like, here's how I want this picture painted, right? So here's how you're going to do it. And then everybody feels better about it. So it really is, you have to solicit it and you have to be sure that you're going to give it. And if I give just a couple of tips on how to do good feedback, one is don't do it at the end of shift because you're tired and you want to go home. Do it like an hour before the end of shift. And, people talk about how, oh, the millennials or now the Generation Z, like they don't accept feedback. This is not true. But you have to be very deliberate when you're giving it. So I tell them, we're going to do feedback now. And then they know, okay, I'm in my feedback mindset, right? But you have to really frame things differently than maybe how things were framed for us when we were the learners. Gen X is just different than Gen Z and millennials, but it's not a valuation of those. It's just, we have to flex a little bit in order to really speak to them and they hear us.
How do you solicit feedback for yourself? How do you give feedback from yourself when you're giving a big 1,000-person talk or when you're actually finishing a gig with MRAP or Rebel EM? Like, what's your lifelong learning for that space?
From a lecture standpoint, I found that None of the feedback systems that are the typical ones you see are valuable. Most of them, you go to a conference, they hand out those forms that are like Likert scales, 1 to 10. 10 is the best, 1's the worst. And the questions are like, did you like the lecture? Did you learn a lot? And if you get 100 of those forms back, right? First of all, you're only going to get about 5 to 10% of people filling them out. So if you get 100 forms back, 90 of them are going to be all 10s, all down the right side, right? And that's useless because you don't learn anything about yourself. You don't learn about your lecture. 9 of them are going to be like all 1s. But that's because people thought 1 was the highest and 10 was the lowest, and they just flipped them. And that's still not useful. And then like 1% will write in the comments, this lecture sucked. I didn't learn anything. I knew all this information. And that's also not useful, right? Like I haven't learned anything from that. So what I try to do, one of the tips that I tell people is I take a bunch of index cards, and before the lecture, I hand out the index cards to everyone in the audience. And when I'm done and I'm leaving the stage, I say, before you leave, if you can just write down 3 things you learned during our time together and leave them in the back. You don't have to put your name on it unless you want to, but just write down 3 things you learned and leave them in the back. And I collect those cards. I go home and I look at them. And the 3 things that people wrote down should match with the 3 things I went into that lecture wanting to teach. If they line up, then I did an okay job. If they don't line up, then I have to think, is my lecture actually about something else, or do I have to refine this more? That's a quick cheat. I mean, there are lots of other ways. You plant someone in the audience to give you feedback that you trust, right? Like if I came to lecture at your institution, I'd be like, Resa, I want you to sit in the audience and I want you to give me feedback on this piece of it, right? Because we trust each other already. You trust that you can give me feedback and I won't take it personally. And I trust that you'll give me honest feedback. Yeah. So you have to build those relationships too.
For people that want to follow along, your work, your medical knowledge and translation, what are the best ways?
So, Rebel you mentioned up top, that is a group that I've worked with. It's free open access medical education, which I love. That's a movement that's been around for, 20 years now. That is kind of my free open access platform that I'm part of. MRAP, for those who want to pay a little bit of money. I don't run the business, but I'm a big contributor there, so you can definitely hear me there. And then Instagram, at EM Swami, that's where I kind of produce my own little videos. It's all free. I'm not looking for any money. It's just a place that I feel comfortable kind of trying to get some of that knowledge out that I think is really important. It's a place that I go to learn from others as well. So you can check me out there too.
What should be the title of our episode?
That's a good question. It depends on how many characters you have, because I'd love it to be, I'm not that smart, but. Because Resa, we're physicians, and there's always been a lot of intellectual value placed on physicians over time. But I think it's also important for us to be honest about who we really are and what we really do. I don't think I'm that smart. I do think that I work really hard to know the things that I know and to be able to communicate those to others. So I think that's going to be, if I was going to be buried and have a tombstone, which I probably won't be, but that's what it would say. I'm not that smart, but. I think that's a really important thing for us to hold on to, that we're all learning. We're continuing to grow. And the idea of thinking that we are smart or thinking that you are smart has a lot of problems associated with it because it doesn't embrace the growth that we all want to have.
The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare, equity, and current trend spaces. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Find me at Resa E. Lewis MD on social media or visit thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts and watch our episodes on YouTube. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the opinions of their institutions. Information shared here should never substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice. Together, we're making healthcare more equitable, one visible voice at a time.